Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening in that app, which is free to download and free to use at all times. Sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you over the course of the program. Love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. You can call or text it into the show. I have two guests I'm very much looking forward to. Hope you are as well. Brian Roth, the voice of the Colorado State Rams, will join me in the next segment. They got a doozy right off the bat. They take on Big Ten foe Washington coming up on Saturday night in Seattle. And we'll talk to him about the season as a whole. What does the future look like for Jay Norvell and this CSU team? And what do they have to get done this season? And then in hour two, the big tilt of the weekend, Texas, Ohio State. Derek Rackley joins me. He'll be on the call for Westwood One. We'll talk Arch and all things that game coming up in hour number two. But I start with the Denver Broncos. Now, I was thinking about this last night. You know, if the Broncos are going to do everything that Sean Payton is decreeing that they're trying to do, you know, and a lot of people are buying in and jumping on the bandwagon, but there's one, I think, essential piece of the conversation that's being left out. If the Broncos are primed to win the AFC West and compete for a Super Bowl, where are all the Bo Nix MVP columns? Where are all the people placing bets on Bo Nix being the MVP? Haven't heard a lot of that. In fact, Adam Rank of NFL.com is the only guy that I have seen place a preseason vote for Bo Nix to be the MVP. But wouldn't you say that they're part and parcel with one another? The Denver Broncos are going to be as good as people think they are. Why isn't Bo Nix being talked about as an MVP candidate? He's 35-1, the odds. He's got the 16th best odds to win MVP. And that didn't sound right to me. Should be higher if the Denver Broncos are being thought of the way that they are. And I think I know why this is the case. Do you notice that with these sports books, they aren't quite as high on the Denver Broncos? We talked about them yesterday. Where's their win total? 9.5. So they're not up there in the 10.5, 11.5 range for over-unders. And Bo Nix, as I just said, 35-1. And I think sometimes that can be telling, because it's one thing for people to say something like the Denver Broncos can compete for a Super Bowl and will win the AFC West. It's another thing to actually put money on it. But if you are somebody who's willing to put money on it, you should be willing to put money on Bo Nix winning the MVP. But I think what we have here is a perception, a conversation around the Denver Broncos, but then when it's actually time for people to literally put their money where their mouth is, maybe it's not happening. So what would Bo Nix need to be the MVP of the league? There are a few metrics or a few milestones that have to be hit, I have found, when it comes to MVPs. First of all, you need to be a QB. That helps tremendously. You need to be the 1 or the 2 seed in your conference. No MVP, by the way, has finished with fewer than 11 wins. You need to have 4,000 yards passing at least, with very few exceptions. You need to have a minimum of 30 touchdowns, and you need to have a passer rating above 100. The vast majority of MVPs obviously in modern times would check all of those boxes. Bo Nix last year met 2 of those criteria. He was a quarterback who had more than 30 touchdowns. Not 30 passing touchdowns, he had 29, but you add in the 4 rushing he had, and he was over that 30 threshold. So that's what Bo Nix is going to have to do in order to be an MVP candidate. And the Chiefs have had less than 11 wins in a season just once since during this 9-year stretch where they have been AFC West champions. So the Broncos would have to, you think, win 11 games to win the division. And if they won their division, then they got a good shot at being the 1 or the 2 seed. So it just goes to my point that if you believe that the Denver Broncos are going to accomplish all these things as a team, then Bo Nix should be in the MVP conversation, but yet he isn't. And I think it's because and I think 2 things can be true. I think you could be bullish on Bo Nix, but also not say that this year is when he's going to ascend to elite quarterback status. And that has been part of my pushback. Like, I don't know if Bo Nix is going to take a jump in year 2. Doesn't mean you can't think Bo Nix has a great career in front of him, but it's just how quickly is he realizing that potential? And I think year 2 is early, and I think a lot of people would think year 2 is early. I think much of the believing in the Broncos is actually based upon Sean Payton versus Bo Nix. The belief is in Sean Payton for this year, and Bo Nix being an extension of that. But I would argue that in order for the Broncos to win the West and to compete for a Super Bowl, Bo Nix has to be one of those guys this year. You see, it just, one has to have the other. I don't think Bo Nix can be an average quarterback and the Broncos achieve great team success in the AFC when you have Josh Allen, Lamar, and Patrick Mahomes, not to mention Joe Burrow. I think that's just your ticket to elite status in the AFC is you have to have a quarterback playing at an elite level. You can't just have a great coach. It helps, but it's not the be-all, end-all. The Broncos need Bo Nix to be an MVP candidate in order to win the division and to compete for a Super Bowl. I don't see any other way around it. You know, you look at Brock Purdy in the NFC and you say, well, he got there and he's not an elite quarterback. NFC's different. NFC doesn't have Josh Allen or Lamar or Patrick Mahomes. it's kind of a wild, wild west out in the NFC. A lot of different things can happen. Like, for instance, the Dallas Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers, which is breaking news this afternoon. But it's not, things are more wide open in the NFC than they are the AFC. And unfortunately for the Denver Broncos, they can't flip conferences. So in order to get where they want to go, to me, Bo Nix has to be an MVP. At least he doesn't have to necessarily win. But again, if the Broncos do all of this stuff, how could he not? How could he not meet those statistical thresholds? And how could he? Because here's another piece that the MVP has to have. And everyone pushes back, oh, the narrative like it's a bad thing. All MVPs have a narrative. All of them do. It's all a story. And who would have a better story than Bo Nix? Bo Nix led the Denver Broncos to dethrone a dynasty. He would have a powerful narrative to be the MVP. And if the Broncos do pull that off, then I have no doubt that he'd have 4,000 yards passing and more than 30 touchdowns. So I just think that the two have to be part and parcel. And if you doubt that Bo Nix can be an MVP candidate, then I don't know how you could say that the Denver Broncos will win the AFC West. And so I think there's a bit of a disconnect with some of the national media that's hopping on the bandwagon, because they should be following up their grand proclamations about the Denver Broncos with their grand proclamations about Bo Nix being an MVP. Because I'm telling you, the list is short. Josh Allen is not going back-to-back. And that's not because Josh Allen isn't a great quarterback or he won't have a great year. He will. There's no way they're giving him another MVP this year. The way I look at it, there's less than a handful of guys that I can really envision winning the MVP. Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, and my dark horse would be Baker Mayfield. That's it. Because you have to marry, there are other quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, for instance, where you could say this is how he wins MVP. But do you believe that he's going to do it? Do you believe that Jalen Hurts will all of a sudden become a prolific passer? Because that's what he would have to be in order to match up with some of these more recent MVPs. And I don't see that happening. As much as I like Jaden Daniels, I don't see how we could come away from this season saying that Jaden Daniels was better than he was a year ago. So I think Mahomes, obviously, Joe Burrow, a lot of people were ready to give it to him if the Bengals simply snuck into the playoffs. They didn't. Lamar is going to be like a Nikola Jokic-like MVP where they go, oops, my bad, let's give it to this guy, like the Jokic after Embiid won. Because I say the same thing about Josh Allen winning last year as Joel Embiid when he won the MVP. I think there was a case for I said Josh Allen was my MVP last year. I think Joel Embiid had a case, but what I feared was that too many people were not voting for Joel Embiid because of what he did, but because they were tired of voting for Nikola Jokic. And I wonder if there was some of that this year with Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. And how many of those voters are now going to flock to Lamar if he has even close to the same season he had last year? And then there's always a dark horse. And I think with as good as Tampa could be, they could run roughshod through their conference. Their defense isn't quite good enough to really hold other teams down. So Baker's going to be slinging the ball around the yard. I think he's going to could hit a lot of these numbers. And a lot of people like Tampa. to not just win their division or be a dark horse to get out of the NFC, to actually get out of the NFC. So that's my list. I don't include Bo Nix, but you already knew that. If you believe that the Broncos are going to win the AFC West and be a Super Bowl contender, Bo Nix has to be in that conversation, because I don't see how they can get there without Bo Nix playing at an MVP level. 719-247-1313. I glossed over it, but we'll get more in depth in that. The Micah Parsons saga did end up differently than some of these other contract stalemates in Dallas. But coming up next, don't want to move Brian Roth off of his slot, because very excited to have him on. The voice of the CSU Rams previews the upcoming football season next on Extra Sports 1300. We'll get into the big NFL story. Again, Micah Parsons has been traded to the Green Bay Packers. What it means in the NFL, we'll get to that shortly, as I said. But we want to talk some college football. As you know, week 0 was nice. It was a nice little appetizer. But around these parts, this is the real start of college football season. CU against Georgia Tech on Friday night. Saturday afternoon, Air Force will take on Bucknell, and then well into the evening, as I'm sure my next guest is acutely aware of, 9 o'clock Mountain Time, it will be the Colorado State Rams taking on the Washington Huskies, who are in the Big Ten, by the way. I have to keep reminding myself of that, and pretty soon I'll have to do that with CSU and remind myself what conference they are in. The voice of the Rams, Brian Roth, joins me. Brian, good to talk to you, buddy. How are you? Oh, you're muted, Brian. Let's see if we can get you going here. Let's see.
How about that?
That's great.
You got me now. All right.
Yeah. What's up, buddy? Why when do you leave?
We fly out tomorrow. So
right.
we usually fly out day before the game, but great to be here. Great to be talking college football. It's finally here. You know, I get to about mid-July, and then that itch starts up. You're just like, let's go. And it's a long month and a half until Labor Day weekend when college football gets into full swing.
And how much did the way that the Rams turned that season around last year make that itch even itchier for you, Brian, to see what was in store for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Ram fan, you like the trajectory of this Colorado State football program under Jay Norvell, right? Jay comes in, and year number 1, they win 3 games. Year number 2, they show signs of improvement. They won 5 games and could have won a 6th in the season finale at Hawaii and lost on a last-second field goal. And then, you're hoping to take that next step last year, and the Rams did. They won 8 games right up until the very last game of the regular season. They were in the Mountain West Conference title hunt, and they made it back to a bowl game for the first time since 2017. So if you're a Ram fan, you got to like the trajectory of this Colorado State football program and just being out there here in the fall. And I told Jay this last night on his coach's show, but this has Jay Norvell's stamp on it, this program. Year number 4, he's gotten the culture down. He's gotten everybody on board. Obviously, you're going to have newcomers with the transfer portal. That's just the nature of college football these days. But Jay Norvell has this program dialed in. So I think Ram fans should be optimistic for the upcoming season. Now, how does that translate to wins? We'll see. You got to win 50-50 games when they present themselves, but I think this has a chance to be another 8-9 win season.
Explain to those who may not quite understand maybe metamorphosis is too strong of a word to describe what CSU did, but offensively, what did they change that seemed to lead to a lot of success in the back half of the schedule?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jay Norvell came into Colorado State as an air raid coach, right? They like to throw the football around. And you looked at what they were able to do at Nevada. Jay was the head coach in Nevada for 5 years. And at his last 3 years, they led the conference in offense, right? He had the Offensive Player of the Year in the Mountain West Conference and back-to-back years in quarterback Carson Strong. And so you saw what Colorado State did the first 2 years trying to throw the football around. But last year, they didn't really have the personnel to do it, especially after Torrey Horton went down. Horton obviously now on the Seattle Seahawks roster. And Jay changed his mindset and really completely changed the offense. They went from air raid to really a pro-style offense where they were running the football about 60% of the time and throwing the football just 40% of the time. But they felt like they had a good offensive line to get it done. They liked their running backs. And, Braden Fowler Nicolosi, the quarterback, threw 16 interceptions 2 years ago. Well, because they ran the football more, threw the football less, those turnovers went down to just 9 interceptions last year. So they took care of the football, they ate up the clock, and they won close games.
Brian Roth, voice of the CSU Rams, joining me here on Drive Time Sports. What's the next step in the evolution of Braden Fowler Nicolosi? What does Jay Norvell want to see from him? What does he want to see from himself?
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to see him throw the football more this year than he did last year. I think that's pretty clear. And look, Braden Fowler Nicolosi is a kid that does not lack confidence, and that's a good thing for quarterbacks, but it can be a bad thing too, because he also feels like there's not a throw in the field that he can't make and that he should try to make every time a small window presents itself. And hence, as I mentioned, 16 interceptions 2 years ago. But this is a guy in Braden Fowler Nicolosi that has 25 collegiate starts under his belt. And that is just something you cannot replace without having done it. There's nothing that replaces experience. So, I think he's got to continue to be sharp and smart with the football here this year. Then I think the coaching staff's really looking for him to become more accurate this year. Accuracy was kind of an issue for him. He understands how to read defenses. He's really good pre-snap, and they've given him the ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage last year, given him more of the ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage here this year. So all of those things, the game processing and the game slowed down for him now. But now the one thing where he can take that next step is just being more accurate with football. And if he can do that, you might see a 25 to 30 touchdown season for Braden Fowler Nicolosi. And if the interceptions are in the single digits, this Colorado State offense has a chance to be pretty good.
Are we going to look back in a couple of years' time and put Braden Fowler Nicolosi above everyone in the history of CSU quarterbacking? Like, is he because of – and I think of somebody like Bradley Van Pelt and just the kind of cult following that he had. But you have this story a couple years ago about Nicolosi somebody was trying to poach him, right? And he chose to stay with CSU. I mean, is he going to be looked at in that way, like maybe the greatest quarterback in Colorado State history?
Well, that would be highly dependent on what happens in the next 3 months, right? I mean, quarterbacks are judged by wins. Sure. What were the Rams doing when Bradley Van Pelt was here? They were winning football games. Right. They were winning a conference championship. What were they doing when Moses Moreno was here back in the mid 90s? And Moses went on to have a decent little NFL career. They were winning football games. And so that's really the determining factor, I think, when you look at quarterback success. Yeah, you got guys that put up big numbers and maybe they'll be at the top of the school's passing list. And a lot of that has to do with longevity. And Braden Fowler Nicolosi is going to have a chance to own some records by the time he leaves, especially if he stays around for his fourth year. But how much are you winning? And to me, that's what affects the quarterback. And if Colorado State goes out there and wins 10 games this year, Ryan, and Braden Fowler Nicolosi is the tip of the spear on this team, and he's the guy that's making them go, well, all of a sudden his name starts getting mentioned, and is he a top 5 quarterback at Colorado State? So it all dependent on this year. As he stands right now, no, because I mean, look, he's led the Rams to a bowl game. They didn't win the bowl game. Obviously they had a lot of guys transfer out before the bowl game, but right. Can you win this year? Can you win 10 games? And if he does, then certainly he's going to start to be talked about like that.
Brian Roth, my guest, voice of the CSU Rams. You keep mentioning winning 10 games. You know better than I do. I kind of think they can. I mean, I'm looking at like Boise State is Boise State, right? Like give them all the respect that they deserve. I think a lot of people are penciling in UNLV, and deservedly so. But tell me why CSU could be in there instead of UNLV at the end of the year.
Well, I mean, I think Colorado State's a good team, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're a great team. We'll find out. But there's a lot of good teams. I think UNLV is a good team. I think Boise State's a good team, maybe borderline great team. But again, the question comes down to, I mean, the difference between a 7-win team and a 10-win team is oftentimes winning those close games, right? I mean, hey, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs last year. I heard a stat they were 10-0 last year in one-score games. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's incredible, right? And, I was going back at Colorado State. Last time they won 10 games was 2014 with Jim McElwain. And it was his third year. It was the year before he left to go coach the Florida Gators. I went back and looked at that schedule. I mean, CSU won 5 coin flip games like coin flip games down the stretch, they went 5-0 in those games. They won 10 games, right? They could have easily, I mean, a couple of games they won on a final field goal, right? Field goal goes wide left or wide right. All of a sudden, that's an 8-win team, right? So, I mean, that's the big question to me. Colorado State's a good team. They're going to be in a lot of close games with some of the better teams. And the question becomes, can you win those close games? And if they can win close games, then you have a chance to win 9 or 10 games. If you don't win those coin flip games with 5 minutes to go, then you can easily be a 6-6 team. So I think that's kind of the range that we're playing with here, Ryan. Is it a 6-6 team? Is it a 10-2 team? And that it's razor thin margins for Colorado State this year. So it'll be fascinating to watch.
So this Washington game, CSU has 3 straight home games after this trip to Seattle. So obviously, era of the transfer portal, the world that you live in, you're having to learn some new guys more than maybe in years past. But what are you most interested in as far as Saturday night? What do you want to see from the Rams against Washington?
Well, some of your listeners might remember, if they're Ram fans, they do. Last year, Colorado State opened on the road in Austin against the then 4th-ranked Texas Longhorns. And we all knew Texas was a national title contender last year. You knew that was probably an unwinnable game. But CSU went down there, and really, I think Ram fans weren't happy at the fact that it looked like Jay Norvell was just trying to go down there, try to manage the game, get out of there without injuries, and go on with the rest of their schedule. I'm saying that was their mindset, but it kind of felt that way, right? Like Colorado State had lost the game before they got off the bus. Now, this year, I think fans are really looking for a CSU team to be competitive. Now, that's not to say that you're going to go into Husky Stadium on Saturday night and beat Washington, but we do know this. A Washington team that they're going to be playing on Saturday night isn't even in the same stratosphere as the Texas team that they faced last year. So, and again, Washington has a chance to be good this year. They're a Big Ten team. They get big-time athletes. We know that. But this is a more manageable game for Colorado State. I think the Rams are more experienced here this year. They have more momentum. And I think we're looking for Colorado State to go out there and be competitive. And again, can you have this thing to a 1-score game going into the fourth quarter, maybe a 10-point game going into the fourth quarter? Can you give yourself a chance to maybe pull something out? But what the Ram fans don't want to see is, again, a 52-0 loss like they had last year, where they just flat out were not competitive. Now, again, a Texas team had a bazillion guys that are now on NFL rosters.
Right.
So, I mean, we get that. But can Colorado State go up there and be competitive and go in there and play to win? And I get the sense that this team has a much different makeup and mindset going into this game in Seattle this year than they did going into Austin last year.
Is there a palpable level of excitement for the move to the Pac-12? I mean, I've seen CSU's AD. He's certainly very bullish on the move and excited about it. But is there some talk going on? I know we're just getting to this football season, and already we're looking forward to next football season. But what's the feeling up there about this move from CSU? Because it looks like the Pac-12 has some grand plans of reclaiming what they have lost in terms of the pecking order in college athletics.
Yeah, I mean, let's start here. I mean, look, we all know it's not the same Pac-12, right?
Sure.
And CSU knows that, right? And the teams that are going to the conference, they know and understand that it's not the Pac-12 of 5 years ago, of 20 years ago, right? But I think what Colorado State is doing here, and yes, people are excited about it, and I think for good reason, because the way the landscape in college football is shifting, there's becoming a separation, right? The haves and the have-nots, and Colorado State's not going to get a Big 12 invite anytime soon. They're not going to get an ACC invite. They're certainly not going to get an invite to the SEC or the Big 10 anytime soon. But a school for Colorado State, like Colorado State, who has really invested in athletics, that has really supported the president, Amy Parsons of Colorado State, is a big-time athletic supporter. They're funding athletics at a high level for a group of 5. You look at their facilities are as good as they get when it comes to group of 5 schools. And so you want to position yourself to be in the best spot you can be with other like-minded institutions that want to fund their football programs and want to compete at the highest level. Like, again, Boise State, San Diego State, obviously Washington State and Oregon State. Then you get Gonzaga in basketball. That's going to be a really good basketball conference, right? And so, I get people saying all the time, well, it's just, that's not the old Pac-12. It's like, yeah, they get that. Nobody's claiming this to be a power conference. But what it is, it's going to be the next best thing below the power conference. It's going to be better than what the Mountain West is. And you kind of get away from some of the schools that aren't funding their athletics to the level that maybe Colorado State and these other schools want to fund their athletics to. So I think it's a great move. I'm really looking forward to getting it started coming up next year.
Well, first things first, the last season in the Mount West for the CSU Rams could be a big one and a consequential one up there in Fort Collins. It starts Saturday night, 9 o'clock Mountain against Washington. Brian Roth will be on the call. Brian, really appreciate the time. Great to catch up, and safe travels up to Washington.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. That's Brian Roth. Does an amazing job calling CSU Rams games. Joining me here on Drive Time Sports. I like CSU. I do. I like them this year. I think you look at the CSU, Air Force. I think CSU has a great opportunity to be the team with the most wins at the end of this year out of those three teams. And I think Brian put it perfectly. And that's why I wanted him on the show, because he knows better than anybody what they need to do in order to be that kind of a team. Coin flip games, close games. Can Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, and this Rams team win more of those than they lose? And that will go a long way in determining their success this season. So, shifting back to the NFL after the break, I was already leaning in a certain direction when it comes to who's coming out of the NFC this year, and I kind of feel like I have been given a sign that I should go ahead and take the plunge. Talk Micah Parsons next on Extra Sports 1300. Saturday night, your Switchbacks face the best team in the West, FC Tulsa, in a must-see match at Widener Field. It will be Cyan night, so make sure you wear the appropriate colored gear and bring the energy as the Switchbacks, again, take on the best the West has to offer. Kickoff at 7. Seats are going fast. Get yours now at switchbacksfc.com. And if you've been listening to the show over the past couple of weeks, I've thrown out a couple of different teams in the NFC that I've been toying with the idea of picking them to go to the Super Bowl. And coincidentally, they both have Bay in their names. And I was having a really difficult time with it. I was hanging on to it the other day with the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift news. I thought this would be a good time for me to go ahead and say that I think that the Chiefs will come out of the AFC and go to the Super Bowl. So why not do the same thing today? Because with the blockbuster deal that has sent Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers for multiple first-round picks and a player on an NFL roster, on the Packers NFL roster, and the Packers proceeding to sign Micah Parsons to the biggest deal for a non-quarterback in the history of the National Football League, I think that the Packers are going to come out of the NFC. I've liked this team for a few years now. And I like Jordan Love. I think that there's a lot on him to hold up his end of the bargain in all of this. But the Packers last year were one of the best defenses in the NFL without Micah Parsons. And now they get a game-wrecking, game-changing pass rusher. I was just about set to pick the Packers anyway. It's either them or Tampa Bay, and to me, this is the sign, like the engagement of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, that it's like, yep, I'm just going to go with that. The Green Bay Packers are coming out of the NFC this year. This is the kind of move that you make to put yourself over the top. Green Bay is one of those teams in the mix, in the conversation, but there are others, right? LA, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Philly, Washington. Like I said in the first segment, the NFC feels pretty open. And this is the type of move that you make when you're one of the teams that feel like, you know what, it could be us. And maybe getting Micah Parsons is just what the Packers need to put them over the top and get them to a Super Bowl. They have Jordan Love, who's in a prove-it year. And last year, he was banged up, right? We thought he was going to be lost for the year after game one. But he was banged up last year. If he stays healthy, these young receivers are going to be older. Their talent is not in question. It's just the youth. They're older now. And again, already with one of the NFL's best defenses, and you add Micah Parsons to it. So I think it will be the Green Bay Packers meeting the Kansas City Chiefs in this year's Super Bowl. But as far as this move is concerned, it is not lost on anybody what has transpired in Dallas sports over the last year. And here you have another star that you're trading out of the city of Dallas, and you wonder why. Why are they doing this? Why did it come to this? Any issues the Mavericks had with Luka, why did it come to a point where the Mavericks felt they had to trade him? Why do the Dallas Cowboys let this get to a point where they felt like they needed to trade Micah Parsons? It all seems so unnecessary. But this prolonged contract negotiation felt different. I just said this the other day. Jerry Jones has played this game before. He played it with CeeDee Lamb. He played it with Dak Prescott, and ultimately it worked out. Now, Jerry Jones had to pay more money, probably, but he's okay with that. But this Micah Parsons thing felt different because it wasn't a team dragging their feet on a negotiation. There was a level of disrespect that got into this. And Jerry Jones's unwillingness to do what the collective bargaining agreement and just normal NFL business, how it gets done is you go through an agent. And the idea that in some way he may be trying to take advantage of Micah Parsons by just negotiating the deal with him, by refusing at Micah Parsons' direction to deal with the agent, and Jerry Jones to have the gall to point the finger at Micah Parsons as if he's in the wrong. Micah Parsons felt disrespected. And I don't think for a second that him having a front row seat to the CeeDee Lamb not to the negotiation itself, but going through this as a teammate of CeeDee Lamb, going through this as a teammate of Dak Prescott. He's seen the way that Jerry Jones operates. And I think going into it, maybe he felt like it would be different. And when it wasn't, I think that irked Micah Parsons. And then when Micah Parsons tried to get this thing back on track and just say, just deal with my agent. Just talk to my agent and get this hammered out. This all sounds good to me. Talk to him. That's why I pay him. That's why I hired him. This is the way it works. Just go talk to him. And Jerry Jones refused. So for the first time, the way that Jera does business has burned him in a significant way. Because even with Micah Parsons, this Dallas defense is not great. And now you're losing by far your best defensive player. Arguably the best player you have. All because you wouldn't deal with an agent. Because if you take Jerry at his word, this wasn't about money. It wasn't like Jerry Jones was unwilling to pay Micah Parsons what he's going to get paid from the Green Bay Packers. This was principle, apparently. This was, a man going back on his word. But it's cost him. And I'm not going to make any grand proclamations about this being a rude awakening for Jerry Jones, because I don't think that it will be. But all of this, playing to the media, all of this embracing the soap opera, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, all this kind of stuff, like Jerry Jones sitting there feeling like in the end, it all works out for the Dallas Cowboys, the way he does business, these long negotiations, the drama, it's all good for the brand. But at some point, you just wondered, is it going to cost him? And this, with Micah Parsons, it felt like it could. And now it has. The way that Jerry Jones does things, which to many people makes that organization look like an unserious franchise. Now you finally have the proof to back up your claim and say, this is not the way that you do business, because they have just lost their best player because they wanted to be the lead story on First Take every day. And Jerry Jones wanted to do his media tour. And then behind closed doors, Jerry wanted to negotiate his way. And his way has cost the Dallas Cowboys dearly. It won't be a rude awakening. It won't be this moment that, Jerry Jones being visited by the ghost of Christmas future and him changing his ways. But now those of us who have been saying you can't do business like this have our example of where it has cost the Dallas Cowboys. As cliche as it is, this is the if you play with fire thing here. They played with fire and they got burnt for the first time. But good for the Green Bay Packers. This severely affects the Dallas Cowboys, and this just might be the thing that pushes Green Bay over the top in the NFC, not in the NFC North for that matter. At least that. But I do think that the Green Bay Packers, sensing how close they are, making a significant move to go all in, and I think it pays off this year, and the Green Bay Packers get out of the NFC. What happens with the Dallas Cowboys? Oh, boy. Getting into that later. Take your thoughts in the meantime. 719-247-1313. Micah Parsons dealt to the Green Bay Packers. How does it change your perception of Green Bay this season? How does it change your perspective on the Dallas Cowboys? More Drive Time Sports right after this. Welcome in hour 2 on this Thursday. Appreciate you tuning in on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. And while you are there, you can drop a comment and I can put it on the screen like JP has done. Boom. I really hate the Bears having to face Parsons twice. That is the breaking news of the day. Micah Parsons is being traded to the Green Bay Packers. And yes, Micah Parsons twice a year is not the recipe to get Caleb Williams' career going in Chicago. The return. The Dallas Cowboys will receive first-round pick next year, first-round pick the year after that, and Kenny Clark. And then Green Bay will sign Micah Parsons to a 4-year, $188 million extension. If you care about guaranteed money, $136 million, and he gets $120 at signing. To me, this puts Green Bay over the top in the NFC. I was already debating before next week when we tend to do Super Bowl predictions on whether to go with Green Bay or Tampa Bay. And I think this breaks the tie for me. And I think this move does make Green Bay the team that's going to come out of the NFC this year. But doesn't it beg the question? I just gave you the details. Would you have done this deal if you're Denver? I mean, Nick Bonitto still not signed. George Payton had a press conference and said that he wanted to keep negotiations in-house, basically. Would not talk about how they were going or anything like that. But when Micah Parsons formally requested a trade, I said, why wouldn't you take Nick Bonitto, who you like, but you're going to have to pay? You're going to have to pay a significant amount of money. Is Nick Bonitto going to make $188 million? Probably not, but guess what? There's the new ceiling for Nick Bonitto's deal. But if you could turn 2 first-round picks and Nick Bonitto into Micah Parsons, doesn't that sound like a deal that Denver should have considered? I mean, given where the Broncos think that they are, if they're on the verge of winning the AFC West and competing for a Super Bowl, how everything I'm saying about the Packers and what this does for them in an also very competitive division. It's not like the Packers were going to waltz to a division title, but in a highly competitive division. But in a division, in a conference in which the Green Bay Packers think that this kind of move could put them over the top, why wouldn't that logic apply to the Denver Broncos? You may like Nick Bonitto, but now close your eyes, not if you're driving. Close your eyes and imagine Micah Parsons chasing after Patrick Mahomes. And you have a quarterback on your on a rookie deal. Like for the Packers, they've paid Jordan Love. Like this is what an all-in move looks like, because not that Packers fans care at this point, but it will cost them some players in the coming years because Jordan Love is paid, and now you're paying Micah Parsons. The Broncos would be a little bit different. And the timeline, 4 years, $188 million. I mean, the Broncos would just be paying Bo Nix at the end of this extension. This absolutely should have been a move that George Paton was trying to dial up. But I know the reason why, and it's not because they think that Nick Bonitto is going to be Micah Parsons. I know the reason why the Broncos probably didn't even engage. Sean Payton doesn't want Micah Parsons on this football team. And it's not anything against Micah Parsons. I could take that. I could say this about Terry McLaurin. I could even say it about Jacoby Myers. Even though Jacoby Myers is kind of in a different class than McLaurin and Parsons are, Sean Payton doesn't want the noise, doesn't want the distraction, doesn't want a guy who would demand a trade. Sean Payton doesn't want that anywhere near his football team. This is not about talent, because in terms of just the players and the pieces involved, this should be, if Jerry Jones called up, and that's what's going to be fascinating, not to take an off-ramp here, but Jerry Jones picking up that phone and calling Green Bay and hammering out a trade, or at least being on the line. I don't know, maybe Stephen Jones did it. But just because of how defiant Jerry Jones was just like 10 minutes ago. Well, a couple days ago. And for him to be on the line, or to actually pick up that phone and make a call to trade him. Can't wait to hear from that guy. But let's say Jerry Jones got the offer from Green Bay and then called up the Denver Broncos and said, will you match it? We'll take Nick Bonitto and 2 first-round picks. That's an easy deal to get done. And it removes the, albeit a small likelihood, and I've said this, I think Nick Bonitto is going to be a terrific pass rusher for years to come. I'm not down on Nick Bonitto, but Nick Bonitto is not Micah Parsons. And in a year or a time frame where the Denver Broncos feel like getting to a Super Bowl is maybe somewhere more certain than a possibility in some of their minds, this deal removes any shred of doubt you have about Nick Bonitto. And it would be fine, because to have even a shred of doubt with Nick Bonitto, because he's just finishing up his rookie deal this year. You don't have the track record. And you get Micah Parsons. Yeah, he's been banged up, but, you know, football players get banged up. It happens. When Micah Parsons certainly isn't injury prone. I don't think anybody's labeling him as that. It boils down to this. At the best case scenario for Nick Bonitto, is he Micah Parsons? The absolute best case scenario. I would say yes. And if you agree with that, then what if I told you that you could actually have Micah Parsons? And you would be able to trade first-round picks in years where you don't need to draft a quarterback, because here was George Payton talking about his roster, and notice the little gem he dropped in about his quarterback.
How talented this roster is, we'll see. And I think, last year we were the 31st roster in the league, and we didn't believe that. And we do think we have a strong roster, and obviously that's day to day, that's week to week, but we feel we're strong in the trenches. Obviously we feel like we have a franchise quarterback. We like the weapons we have on offense, and we play really good defense, and that's a recipe to win a lot of games.
They have a franchise quarterback. Going into year 2, George Payton is saying Bo Nix is a franchise quarterback. And the Broncos have one of the best rosters in the NFL. So what do you really foresee the Denver Broncos absolutely having to have in the next 2 drafts that it wouldn't be worth it to get one of the best defensive players in the league? You think Vance Joseph has been impressive with Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito and Zach Allen. Imagine what he could do with Micah Parsons. And Jonathan Cooper and Zach Allen. So if this deal were presented to the Denver Broncos, it should be a no-brainer. But the reason why they would turn it down is because they are doing things Sean Payton's way, and Sean Payton doesn't want the noise. I don't even know if he loves the idea that Bo Nix has a YouTube page. But he would not like Micah Parsons coming in, even if the Broncos paid him and Micah Parsons would be happy and everything would be great. Sean Payton would not want any chance that in a year or 2, Micah Parsons goes on his podcast and starts talking about the Denver Broncos. Even in glowing terms, I feel like Sean Payton may not like it. He wants to be the mouthpiece for the team. He wants himself to be at the top and be the most important person communicating with the outside world. And he wants to control when we hear from Bo Nix and when we hear from these other players. The idea that Micah Parsons has his own podcast that he can just go on at any point, it would drive Sean Payton crazy. But is that the right way to think? When you have a chance, and I know people doubted that Micah Parsons was going to go anywhere, but now with the benefit of hindsight, and maybe it's coming as a shock to some people that Micah Parsons is getting traded, I would say it's probably less of a shock within NFL circles. Like, I'm talking about team to team. Although maybe we'll find out Jerry Jones did this deal like Nico Harrison did the Luka deal. Called up the Packers, had a conversation with the Packers and the Packers alone. But unless that was the case, I got to imagine there were at least some people in NFL front offices that thought this might be able to happen. And I'm sure Jerry Jones's phone was ringing. So if this level of a player was available and a team has just acquired him to push them over the top in a competitive division and give them a real chance at winning a Super Bowl this year, how are the Broncos not thinking exactly the same thing? Why aren't they thinking exactly the same thing? Because I don't think that they were. (719) 247-1313. Would you have done that deal? 2 first-round picks and Nick Bonito for Micah Parsons. And did the Broncos potentially lose out? take your thoughts on that. We'll resume that conversation in just a little bit. Coming up next, Derek Rackley of Westwood One joins me. This football game on Saturday, it is a biggie. It is Texas and it is Ohio State. So much in this game. Is there any way that we can have a rational thought regarding either the winner or the loser of this game? I will ask Derek Rackley next on Extra Sports 1300. here on Extra Sports 1300 this Saturday. It is a game that has been met with quite a bit of anticipation as the defending national champions Ohio State take on the number one ranked team in the land in Texas. You can hear that game right here on Extra Sports 1300 at 10 a.m. on Saturday, and my guest will be on the call. He is Derek Rackley of Westwood One. Derek, good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm doing great. As you mentioned, we start off week one. I mean, it's like, are you a week zero fan or are you just like a first week of the season fan? Because we technically had football last week. I was actually in Kansas. I had Kansas and Fresno State last week. But the point of my comment is we get a juicy one here week one. Yeah,
it was. I would like either. It's okay that everyone doesn't play week zero, but I would like more. More week zero, more of a hearty appetizer, I suppose, is what I would like. Although I was very much looking forward to your game because obviously Kansas in the Big 12 with CU and then Fresno State in the Mountain West. So yeah. No, looking forward to this one.
This is kind of the fun part about my job is I start telling people they know what I do for work. And they're like, oh, hey, where are you going this weekend? And like when you start off the season by you saying, oh, I'm going to Ohio State, they're like, Texas, Ohio State, week one? Like, dude, you get awesome games. And I'm like, yeah, that's the reason why I work for Westwood One is because the places that I get to go, the games that I get to call, and the fact that I get paid to do it, it's awesome. That's why I love what I do, and I give up my weekends to do it.
Right, and you're great at what you do, and that's why you get to go to places like Ohio State and call a game like this. In terms of the anticipation level, you've called a lot of games. You've called games at the in the NFL as well. Where would this one rank in terms of the level of anticipation people have for it?
Yeah, I mean, regular season, it's high up there. And Ryan, I got to kind of throw a little disclaimer out there. And maybe it's just because I've been doing this for so long, but like, I'm not really much of a fan of games anymore. Like, trust me, like I am super excited. I love what I get to do, but like I don't necessarily value one tremendously more than the other because I'm always worried. I focus on the week at hand. Like next week I have Oklahoma State and Oregon, and people are like, oh, well, such and such in that game. And I'm like, no. Don't talk about that game because I'm only worried about this game. I become an expert this week on the two teams that I'm calling in this game. And then I'll worry about next week when it gets to next week because this brain can only hold so much information at a time. And when you think about however many kids are on a college roster, how many are transfers, how many are freshmen that you generally don't know a whole lot about. So you got to kind of learn about all these players. No, by the way, they changed coaches too. Ohio State has 2 new coordinators. There's a learning curve that goes every single week that I have to get myself ready to go for a Saturday. And yes, I don't necessarily get everything out in the broadcast that I learn, but I never know which, call it 10 or 15% is going to come out. And then I let the game dictate what does come out, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm more of a guy that just kind of lives in the moment. So I'm super excited about this one, but like I call Ohio State, Michigan every single year. I call the SEC championship game every single year. Those are pretty awesome games that I get. And then there's about 3 or 4 other ones during the course of the regular season, much like this one, that you look at and you're like, oh, wow, like this is one of the biggest games of the year. And it's happening in week one.
Mm-hmm. But what's going to happen there. And it's going to be just like Ohio State, Oregon last year, where we made grand proclamations about, Ohio State, they're done. It's over. And then look what happened. Is there anything that you think will be a reasonable thing to say after this game in terms of its consequence?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan, because I remember because we had that game, right? I called that game last year. It was a great game. And I remember saying after that game, I said, Ohio State is still good enough to win a national championship because it's too early in the season to write somebody off, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, obviously, we saw last year how this college football playoff is evolving, that you have the amount of teams that you're getting in and the opportunities. So it's like now you just got to get in the dance. And look what happened to Ohio State, right? They lose to Michigan. They still end up getting all the way through and they win the whole thing. And talent yes, I was going to say talent doesn't slump. Talent can have a bad game. But when I watched Ohio State last year and I saw all the pieces on that team, I was like, they might have lost this game, but like this team is not over with. Like they were that good. They had that many talented players. Very well could be the same case this year, but I haven't seen this 2025 team play yet, especially with a new quarterback and new coordinators, and they lose, 14 guys to the NFL draft. I need to see what it looks like on Saturday, and then I'll kind of tell you what I think about, they're really good or that team could win a national championship.
Do we know what Arch Manning is good at?
I think we have a pretty good taste. So the action that he got last year, I think he learned a lot, even though it wasn't a ton, but he had a couple of games where he put up some pretty sick numbers, albeit one of those to UTSA, which is much lower level competition. But still, I always say that's still a game, and he's got to go out there and he's got to live up to the hype. Think about the hype that has surrounded him for the amount of years that he's been out of high school, even when he was in high school. And how do you live up to that? And he did it for 2 games against UTSA, Mississippi State, got some action against Georgia, which was probably a little bit humbling, but that's going to be more like what he's going to face this weekend. He's going to face that level of athlete, that level of scheme preparation, and that just sheer out competition, and the fact he's going to go on the road. However, one thing I did research, and you don't have to worry, I think, too much about Texas being overwhelmed by the moment. And I'd have to go back and look. I don't have it that ingrained in my head yet. But I think the number is Texas played in front of 9 crowds last year that were over 100,000 people and 2 more that were over 90,000 people. Wow. So this atmosphere is not going to freak them out. It's not like it's a team that plays in front of 48,000 and then they're going to go and double that this weekend. So and I get back to Arch, like this is not going to be too big of a moment for him, because they play in front of 100,000 seemingly every week. Yes, it's going to be in uncharted territory. It's going to be in a tough place to play. I've been to Columbus many a times, but I don't think that's going to be the reason or the excuse if Texas were to lose.
Derek Rackley, my guest, he'll be on the call Saturday for Ohio State and Texas. How about on the other side, what Julian's saying? What's the scouting report on this newish Ohio State quarterback?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I don't really know yet. I will tell you that I got a chance to interview Jeremiah Smith yesterday, and I asked him that question. I said, we haven't really got a chance to see much of Julian Sands, so kind of give us the scouting report. And, he did about the best thing that I don't know how old he is. Let's call him 19-year-old wide receiver. That's one of the biggest stars in the country, on what he can give. And he said that he's a leader, extremely talented, did a great job through camp earning that position. And he basically told us that he's excited to see what he brings to the field. That's always the question mark when you come in with a young quarterback. But I will tell you, Ryan, I've been in Columbus for a number of years, and I've seen a lot of young quarterbacks, J.T. Barrett, Cardale Jones. You could just go down the list of all these quarterbacks that have come into that system, and they have done extremely well. So they're going to set him up for success. He's going to have a ton of playmakers around him. And then it's just whether he can manage the moment, right? Can he keep his heart rate low? And then can he respond to adversity? Because there's going to be some kind of adversity in the game. He's going to make a mistake. He's going to miss a receiver. He's going to throw a pick. He's going to fumble or something like that. How does he respond from adversity? Because you got to be able to get off your back when something bad happens in a big moment when, guess what? Everybody in the country is watching and listening.
Derek Rackley, my guest. Is there a comp for Jeremiah Smith that you've seen?
Is there a calm? Is that what you said?
Comp, like as a player.
Comp. Actually, I never even thought about that. I think he's got I'm gonna throw a couple different things on him. I think he's got the wow factor of an Odell Beckham Jr. in his prime. I think he's got physicality of somebody like Larry Fitzgerald or even Drake London right now, because he is a big receiver. And I think, that's a couple really good ones right there. And then you can kind of throw them in the same conversation as the, Garrett Wilson's, Marvin Harrison's, as far as just excelling at Ohio State. Like, it's one thing to go to Ohio State, but it's another thing to completely elevate your game. Like, in 1 year, Jeremiah Smith put himself in the same conversation as all the greats at Ohio State. I asked him the question yesterday about wide receiver right? Like, I think Alabama wants to claim it. I think LSU wants to claim it. I think USC would want to claim it at some point throughout their existence. But right now, you probably got to argue that wide receiver U is Ohio State or maybe LSU, and he's just the next one in the tree. Emeka Ibuka last year, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, just go down the list. They continue to pump them out every single year.
Yeah, he's something else, that's for sure. The Fitzgerald comp, I really like that one. And given his success so early in college football, that reminds me a little bit of Larry Fitzgerald as well. Derek Rackley, my guest, he'll be on the call for Westwood One's coverage of Texas and Ohio State. You mentioned how much more difficult your job has gotten with the transfer portal in college football and how new, especially Ohio State, is. So given that, you've learned as much as you can learn, but what questions do you have about these two teams? Maybe even beyond how Arch Manning and Julian Sayin are going to perform. What questions do you have about these two football teams?
With both of these teams, they're at the level now where they recruit extremely well. They're both in the reload conversation, whether that's freshmen or that's transfers now, right? Mm-hmm. Because in order to get on the field at these two schools, you've got to be a legit player. But when I look at the losses of both two teams, the first thing that comes to my mind as far as the difference in this game is who steps up and fills the shoes. And I'm going to give you an example. Like, they're going to lose. Ohio State lost 14 players to the NFL draft last year. Okay. Texas lost 12, right? So both of them were littered all over the NFL draft. That means you're talking about premier level players that have to be replaced. So I think about a guy like Edric Houston coming to the defensive line. He was a 5-star athlete coming out of, oddly enough, Buford, Georgia, which is the same area of town that I live in. And he's kind of had to wait his turn. And now it's like his time to step up and show that you were the 5-star athlete that they recruited you to be. Okay. And that has to happen a number of different times. Like Texas lost 2 defensive backs. They both lost players on the offensive line. How do you replace the guys that went to the NFL, number one? And the guys that do return, how much do they take a leadership level and bring their game up, right? Like Colin Simmons was a freshman All-America, Sean Alexander Award last year from Texas. Like, how much better is he this year? Texas gets CJ Baxter back at the running back position. He was hurt last year. How much does he and Trey Wisner end up taking that running game to the next level? Who ends up replacing some of the defensive backs from Ohio State that have left? So those replacements, and then for Ohio State, replacing both coordinators is something that's on the top of my mind. Texas does not have to do that. Not only do they have the same coordinators back, I think they've all been there along with Steve Sarkisian for 5 straight years now. That's very rare in college football these days.
Right. And you bring up a great point, and there's an NFL comparison, right? The Detroit Lions are going through this. The Philadelphia Eagles went through it a couple of years ago. I mean, how long does that take into a season, do you think, to get things settled between new coordinators and the sides of the football that they coach?
Yeah, I mean, I could answer that, and I could use one of the teams that's playing in this is with Texas. I mean, I think they had that transition with Pete Kwiatkowski, and the reason why I say that is because I've been doing this long enough to where about 5 or 6 years ago, I was calling Texas games, and the Texas defense was not very good. Like, they just weren't, because I played in the late 90s and I was in the NFL in the early 2000s, and I saw year after year the quality of player that Texas was pumping out each year. And then it got to like the mid-teens, right? 15, 16, 17, 18. And you didn't see this many Texas players come into the NFL. So it was like, what happened, right? And then Sarkisian comes and he brings his staff. And it wasn't like you just snapped a finger and the defense was great again. It took a while for Kwiatkowski to figure out how he was going to coach at Texas, for them to get the right player in, and then for those players to buy into what they were doing from a schematic standpoint, and then reloading that year after year. But when you have stability at the head coaching position, it becomes easier because the culture is already in place from Sarkisian and Ryan Day, right? So, you can make the argument, well, there was issues with Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator at Ohio State, with Ryan Day. Well, that happens, right? Like, only one guy gets the end he gets the final word at the end of the day. It's the head coach, right? That's not really the concern this year for Texas, but I saw it year after year continue to get better and better and better. And now Texas is in the same conversation, especially defensively, as we saw with Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State. The level of their player has elevated so much because of stability, buy-in, and because the program is successful. They're now getting those elite level players.
Well, can't wait for this one on Saturday, and who knows, we may see these two teams again at a later date. Texas and Ohio State, 10 a.m. Coverage starts at 9:30 with the pregame show here on Extra Sports 1300, courtesy of our friends at Westwood One, and you will hear Derek Rackley prominently featured on the broadcast. Derek, this was awesome. Appreciate the insight, and enjoy yourself there in Columbus, huh?
Yeah, you guys get some awesome breakfast college football there in Colorado. 10 a.m. action, huh?
Yeah, we love it. The noon kickoff for the way they branded the 10 a.m. That's good for us. That's good.
Wake
for
up
us.
and get great college football right from the jump. You guys enjoy it.
Absolutely, we will, Derek. Really appreciate you.
You bet.
Previewing the matchup between Texas and Ohio State. This is going to be fascinating, and there is no way that we will have reasonable takes about Arch Manning, about Ohio State, Texas after this one, because we did it with, as I mentioned with Derek, we did this with Ohio State and Oregon. We said Ohio State was done, and they were far from done. But it's going to be a great showcase matchup Saturday morning, 10 a.m. right here on Extra Sports 1300. Coming up next, we get back into the Micah Parsons conversation. What does he do for the Packers, and what does his now absence mean for the Dallas Cowboys? And should the Broncos have gotten in on the action here? This Saturday, the Air Force Falcons are back in action, and so is the Cadet Wing. Experience college football's best pregame and most unique game day atmosphere against Bucknell. Kickoff at 1:30 if you would like to go and bring 3 people that you very much would like to watch a football game with. I got your hookup. 4 tickets to the 13th texter to text Falcons in their name to 719-247-1313. Micah Parsons traded from the Dallas Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers, and at times like this, when a blockbuster trade happens, especially when it is so avoidable, this was not something that the Dallas Cowboys had to do, but Jerry Jones doing things the way Jerry Jones does it finally came back to bite him. And I think about people who have great affinity for that Dallas Cowboys team. I think about my brother and what he must be going through today. And I think about my guy, Aaron. Well, my brother's not also a Mavericks fan. Aaron's also a Mavericks fan. So it's been a rough year for him. It brings up a great point. I hope I'm not betraying trust, Aaron, when you text me. But let's not forget recent history between the Dallas Cowboys and Green Bay Packers. So if you're a Cowboys fan, it's not just that the Cowboys traded Micah Parsons. You traded him to a team that you've run into over the years and will maybe run into again. Although I don't know. I don't know what we make of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, are they a 5-win football team without Micah Parsons? No. But we know what has happened in that division, who's at the top of that division. Jaden Daniels is there now. You know, Dallas, you look around the NFC, this puts Dallas's hold on a playoff spot, makes it a bit tenuous, don't you think? Given the number of teams, you think, all right, out of the NFC South, there's Tampa. Don't really feel great about any other team, so that's okay. But the North, Green Bay was already going to be one of those teams that was a playoff team. I had them winning the NFC North before they got Micah Parsons. You have Detroit, who I think takes a step back, but do they take a step back enough that they're completely out of the playoffs? Minnesota, questions about J.J. McCarthy, but you know everything else with that team is good. San Francisco, bounce back year, being healthier. L.A., what's going on with Matthew Stafford, plus the Eagles and the Commanders, and you're like, could Dallas be on the outside looking in? I don't think they are. But the idea that they're a sure thing to make the playoffs, no. And when they get there, already they were a team that you questioned how they would fare in the playoffs, and now you doubt that even more. Yeah, to trade him to the Green Bay Packers of all teams, too. I mean, outside of trading him within the division, is there a worse landing spot? Maybe not. Couple of your texts in here. Brett says, you say Nick Bonito is no Micah Parsons, who says he won't be. He defends the run better than Micah Parsons, and he rushes the quarterback just as well. This year he did. And that's all I'm saying. I like Nick Bonito, but right now you can't put him on the same level as Micah Parsons. You could say last year he produced at a rate similar, maybe even better than Micah Parsons, who missed a few games. But you have to give Micah Parsons the edge because of what he's been able to do for a longer period of time than Nick Bonito. But now you're in a situation where if you believe that the Broncos could have had Micah Parsons, and I don't know why they couldn't have, I know why they don't want him. I made that point earlier. Sean Payton doesn't want the noise that accompanies Micah Parsons. To say nothing of how he feels about Nick Bonitto. I just know how Sean Payton operates, and Micah Parsons' whole deal would not, Sean Payton would not like that. But now it's like, okay, well, we'll see with Micah Parsons, or with Nick Bonitto, rather. Does he become Micah Parsons? Maybe. But my point is, if it becomes Micah Parsons, right? That's the ceiling. Easily one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. And I told you could just have that ceiling now. Right now. You could have that guy that you think Nick Bonitto is going to be, but you could have it now without any risk that he's not, because he is indeed Micah Parsons. Get what I'm saying here? So you take out the downside that maybe there's a small chance that Nick Bonitto had a great year last year and is not going to be able to follow it up. I admit it's a small chance, but there's a chance. It's like that Family Guy cutaway. I think it's a cutaway, or maybe it's just a regular scene, but the guy offers Peter, you could have a boat or you could have what's in the box. And Lois is like, this is ridiculous. We'll take the boat. And Peter's like, hold on. A boat's a boat, but the mystery box could be anything, even a boat. It's the same thing here. Like, Nick Bonitto could be a Micah Parsons, but Micah Parsons is already Micah Parsons. So that's why I say that the Broncos, and again, giving up first-round draft picks in 2 years that apparently the Broncos don't need anything, wouldn't that make sense? But here's a text from Tucker that I think is a great point here. Says, I understand what you're saying. It was dumb to get rid of Parsons, but it's not going to make a difference in winning 8 games or 11 games. If he was a quarterback, maybe. I don't know if you're referring to Green Bay or my scenario with Denver. But let me go at that as if you're talking about either one of those teams. With the Packers, I already thought they were an 11. I already, on a previous episode of this program, said that the Green Bay Packers were my pick to win the NFC North. I already think they're that team. Now we're talking about adding Micah Parsons to maybe be the best team in the NFC. With the Denver Broncos, there might lie a point. Because the scenario I am spinning with Micah Parsons in an alternate universe ending up with the Denver Broncos and having the same impact as he will have on the Green Bay Packers is granting that the Denver Broncos believe they are in a team in that position. I agree. Micah Parsons is not going to add 3 or 4 wins to any team. But the Broncos already think that they're capable of winning their division, which will take no fewer than 11 wins to get. But if the Broncos may just be a little bit further away than that, then giving up 2 first-round picks and a Nick Bonitto would not make as much sense. So when I'm talking about Micah Parsons and the impact he's going to have on the Packers and what impact he might have on the Denver Broncos, I'm looking at it through the lens of where the Denver Broncos think they are. If you think you are a team that is ready to compete for a Super Bowl, as Green Bay already thought they were, why wouldn't a similar move make sense? And the answer to that is they're actually not that team. Now, I could still make the argument that having Micah Parsons for the next couple of years is a very good idea. But this would be an all-in for now, right now. We're ready to go now, and that's what the Packers are doing. With the Broncos, they're getting into that conversation, and having Micah Parsons for the next few years would help them with that. But maybe they're not as ready to compete as Green Bay is. Maybe, just maybe, they might want to hang on to those 2 first-round picks, just in case. Maybe they believe Bo Nix can be a franchise quarterback. But maybe he hasn't necessarily proven that yet. And you want to protect yourself just in case. That would be why the Denver Broncos would not be interested in making a deal like Green Bay did. Continue to take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. All avenues of the Micah Parsons deal explored as we proceed here on this Thursday. Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health. And a special shout out to those of you watching the show on social media at XTRA Sports 1300, no matter where you go to seek this show out on a daily basis. If you are watching on social media, you can comment on today's topics right there. Or you could do it a different way, the more traditional way, if I may. Texting or calling into the show, 719 24/7-1313. Speaking of, that number can help you win things on occasion. Like Eric just scored himself 4 tickets to see Air Force hosting Bucknell on Saturday. Right now, let's go to the 3 stories that are driving the show, which is actually just 3 sides to one story. Yes, it is multiple sides to just one story, and it is a biggie. Micah Parsons has been traded by the Dallas Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers. In return, the Dallas Cowboys will get the next 2 first-round picks from the Green Bay Packers. They will also get a good offensive player, although maybe not Micah Parsons level player, because they're giving up Kenny Clark, but a good, solid veteran defensive player, which is not what Dallas Cowboys fans want to hear, because Kenny Clark's not Micah Parsons. Green Bay also turned around and made Micah Parsons a very, very rich man, the richest man in the NFL that is not a quarterback. So the angles to this story. Let's first start with the Green Bay Packers. This is a team that I have already said I have coming out of the NFC North, and I was seriously considering them to be a Super Bowl team, and this just puts them over the top for me. They're already one of the best defenses in the NFL. They have a very talented wide receiving core, and maybe Jordan Love will not be one of those upper echelon Mahomes, Allen, Lamar type quarterbacks, but I think he has a chance to be near the top of that next tier. And if he plays to that level with an already elite defense, adding one of its most elite players in the league in Micah Parsons, this pushes it over the top, and the Green Bay Packers, I'm going to take coming out of the NFC. This is the type of move that you make when you already feel like we're in the Super Bowl conversation. What else could we possibly be trying to get in the next couple of NFL drafts? Let's land one of the with the quarterbacks that kind of one of the 3 best defensive players, 4 best defensive players. We're looking at Surtain, Watt, Garrett, and Parsons in some order. Let's go add that. And guys like this don't become available. So for the Green Bay Packers to make this kind of a move to say we are all in. It's not that Micah Parsons can't be a great player for the Packers for multiple years, but you make this kind of a deal now, 1, because it's available to make, and 2, because you say, we believe we can win a Super Bowl this year by adding Micah Parsons, and I think the Green Bay Packers may be right. So this makes Green Bay my favorite to come out of the NFC. Now, that is the less interesting angle to this story, I will admit. The more interesting angle is what this means for Dallas. And what it means for Dallas is that finally the way that Jerry Jones chooses to do business, where he doesn't believe the rules apply to him, that he doesn't need to go through an agent, and common sense, we think, eludes him so often. You have all these teams trying to lock up their best players early so they will save money in the long run. Jerry Jones doesn't want to do that for the sake of being talked about. He embraces the soap opera. He is willing to pay a premium on some of his best players to be that soap opera, to be the most talked about team in the NFL and maybe all of sports, to be America's team. And it has finally bit him right on the rear end. Eventually, Dak Prescott signed. Eventually, CeeDee Lamb signed. But this negotiation felt different. It felt like Micah Parsons was drawing a line in the sand and said, "You're not doing this with me." And Jerry Jones was defiant in that. Said, "Oh, I'm going to do it this way because this is how I always do it, and I am Jerry Jones, and it will work out." Well, it didn't. And he had to pick up the phone and call another team and trade his best player because he was too stubborn to just do things the way everybody else does. You negotiate with an agent. This isn't 1965. You don't shake hands with people and expect that to be a legally binding agreement. Just talk to the guy's agent. That's all Micah Parsons wanted. They already agreed on money. But there's a way you do things, and Jerry Jones was unwilling to do it. And going up against the preeminent agent in the National Football League and a star player who had seen Jerry Jones do this time and time again, he met his match. And just when you thought the Dallas Cowboys could not look like a more foolish organization, a more unserious franchise, this happens. And now, are they a playoff team? Maybe you felt like Dallas wasn't even a playoff team to begin with. I did. I'm like, even with their dysfunction, even with the soap opera that they are year in and year out, if Dak Prescott is healthy, you can bank on this team winning double-digit games. But the NFC East, it's a different world. You don't have the football team in the D.C. area to beat up on anymore. You have to be at your best. And this is a huge blow to the Dallas Cowboys. Sure, they're better than the New York Giants. But being the third best team in your division, you can look at with the seventh playoff team in each conference, it doesn't mean you're doomed. But it makes your margin for error so razor thin. And things like tiebreakers come into play. And you look across the NFC, Dallas might find themselves on the outside looking in. I know who's celebrating more than anybody else, maybe even more than the Packers. I think it's the Commanders. I think even with a bit of regression from Jaden Daniels in these one-score games, these late-game heroics, let's say they don't work out every time for the Commanders. Now they got a little bit of wiggle room. Now I don't think they have to be quite as prolific in those late game, late down situations as they were a year ago and still be able to get into the postseason. And now Dallas is going to go up against an LA or a San Francisco, a Minnesota or a Detroit for the last playoff spot. And you wonder how the Dallas Cowboys are going to climb out of this. But this year, their chances of even making the playoffs, they've taken a significant hit. And once again, it is a Dallas franchise that you're just looking at and you're like, what the hell are you doing? I mean, you can't to go from the Luka trade to this. But I suppose many Cowboys fans may look to Dez Bryant to lead them through to lift their spirits, because Dez Bryant tweeted out shortly after the news broke, Arch Manning is going to be wearing a star on his helmet. We know what happened, how the NBA bailed out the Dallas Mavericks by giving them Cooper Flag. They did not earn Cooper Flag. They did not deserve Cooper Flag, but somehow they ended up with him. That's how Dallas fans will put on a brave face. You know, the last time one of our franchises made a completely idiotic decision, it actually kind of worked out okay. And here's the third aspect of this, the more local aspect. If Michael Parsons was being reported that Dallas was listening to offers, it wasn't like, because the Luka trade, for comparison, it wasn't on anyone's radar. Michael Parsons getting traded was on people's radar. They said that there were reports that the Cowboys were willing to listen. And when I initially saw those reports, I'm like, well, this is Trey Hendrickson. Cincinnati did this, and then the next chapter in that book was they came to the agreement with Trey Hendrickson. And I thought when those reports came out about Parsons, it was going to be the last step before ultimately, okay, they shopped around, didn't see what they liked, but in some way they, acquiesced to Micah Parsons and say they could go back to him and say, hey, we tried to trade you. We didn't like what we were getting back in return, so now we're signing you. But if it was being widely reported that the Cowboys were listening, should the Denver Broncos have been talking to them? And I say, if the Broncos believe that they are a team similar to the Green Bay Packers, like we're in the Super Bowl conversation, how could they not be looking to add a Micah Parsons? I mean, George Payton already claimed, I think it was either today or yesterday, played the audio earlier. He mentioned Bo Nix they believe they have a franchise quarterback. Okay. That'd be the most important thing to get with your next 2 first-round picks. So I said this when Micah Parsons requested a trade. I said the Denver Broncos should be calling. Makes a ton of sense. But I don't think that the Denver Broncos were serious about bringing in Micah Parsons. I think for number one, and maybe this is enough of a reason to trump everything else. I don't think Sean Payton would have liked Micah Parsons on his football team. Too much noise. Wouldn't like that Micah has his own podcast. Wouldn't like the fact that Micah Parsons at another place asked for a trade and brought the circus to town. Sean Payton wouldn't want that. So we could debate all day whether Micah Parsons is better than Nick Bonito, whether Nick Bonito will ever be Micah Parsons, whether the asking price would be ultimately worth it for the Denver Broncos, which I think it would be. But the sideshow that Micah Parsons has created in Dallas, or this, I mean, he has to own up to some of it, right? He's not a victim necessarily in all of this. He's helped bring the circus to town. I don't think Sean Payton would want any part of it. Even if from a football standpoint, offering that same deal to the Dallas Cowboys, to me, would be a no-brainer for the Denver Broncos. 719-24-7. 1313. Take your thoughts on the Micah Parsons deal. Does this make the Packers the favorite in the NFC? Or if you just want to dump on the Dallas Cowboys, I'm here for that too. Our athlete of the week is back with the help from our friends at Blackjack Pizza. Just go to extrasports1300.com to nominate a deserving high school athlete in Southern Colorado on Tuesday, because Monday's a holiday. On Tuesday, we will have finalists for you to vote on all week, and the leading vote getter will join me on next Friday's edition of the show, and we'll just keep doing that week after week. So keep your nominations coming throughout the year, but for now, go to extrasports1300.com to participate in our Extra Sports Athlete of the Week, sponsored by the fine folks at Blackjack Pizza. You know, there's another aspect of this Micah Parsons deal that people are pointing out. Because I look at the return for Dallas, and I just say, from the Packers' perspective, or from, I talked about Denver, from their perspective, that's a deal that you do. That's a price that you pay. So I don't really think twice about it. But Mike Tannenbaum of ESPN and others are pointing out, if Dallas would have done this earlier, if there was any inkling that they were going to trade Parsons, they could have done this earlier, like, I don't know, draft night, before free agency, early in free agency. And maybe they could have driven up the price for Micah Parsons. I saw one person on Twitter point out the Jets got 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams. And one of the 4 best defensive players in the league, which Jamal Adams never has been. Micah Parsons is currently one of the 4 best defensive players in the league. Gets essentially the same thing. So it just adds to how much Dallas bungled this. But, and I'm not saying in Jerry Jones's defense, because I would never do such a thing. But I will say, I don't think it entered Jerry Jones's mind that he would trade Micah Parsons. That's how much of a one-track mind he has. I don't think up until 48 hours ago that it even entered his headspace that he'd be trading Micah Parsons. And I'm going to be fascinated to find out when Jerry Jones speaks, because he will. What changed? But up until these recent reports of Dallas listening, I don't think Jerry Jones was even thinking he would trade Micah Parsons, that there was any scenario in which he would trade Micah Parsons. Because he's done things his way for so long, and we can talk about how it hasn't worked out for the Cowboys to win a Super Bowl, but I'll say this about the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones. I think they want to win a Super Bowl. It's their goal to win a Super Bowl. They like to win a Super Bowl, but are they willing to do whatever it takes to win a Super Bowl? If you told Jerry Jones that gave him, you're a genie, and you said that you were going to grant him his ultimate wish, which is to win a Super Bowl, because I think he wants to win one. And you say the only trade-off, it's like the monkey paw thing. Like, the trade-off is you don't speak to the media. And nobody talks about the Dallas Cowboys. It's just about football. But you'll win a Super Bowl. I don't know that Jerry Jones does that deal. So he wants to win a Super Bowl. He pines to win another Super Bowl. In the documentary on Netflix, you have his daughter and other people saying that they desperately want Jerry Jones to get another Super Bowl, but are you willing to do whatever it takes? And part of doing whatever it takes is toning down the sideshow and just making smart, shrewd, quiet, good football moves to build your roster. And the Dallas Cowboys have been unwilling to do that. They want to make a lot of noise. They don't want to pay guys early. They want to drag it out, and they want to make a whole spectacle of it. So I have no doubt Jerry Jones wants to win a Super Bowl. But is he willing to do it at whatever cost? Like saving money by signing these guys early. And he has proven that he doesn't want to do that. But I don't think he even thought he was going to trade Micah Parsons. And whatever the catalyst was for him to finally decide, all right, we're going to have to entertain this and now actually trade the guy, the Cowboys got less in return than maybe they would have if they had done a deal like this in the spring. And it's just another, and that way it's very much like the Luka deal. Because you looked at the return, the Mavericks got back, and you're like, that it? And I think there's a bit of a feeling here with the Micah Parsons deal. Brett says, this move makes your favorite to come out of the NFC, Green Bay. It makes me the favorite. It makes me the favorite of the Detroit Lions because they will run right at him with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I have to concede that Micah Parsons is not a great run stopper. The Green Bay Packers defense as a whole last year was the 7th best rush defense in the National Football League. Will they fall from that? Let's say that they do. Because now they have a weak chain in the weak link in the chain. So they get run on a little bit more by Knuckles and Sonic and every other team, every other running back. How far do they fall? From 7th to 10th? But now you're adding a guy to a team that was top 10 in pass defense. And you're making that better. So the trade-off here, I think the Green Bay Packers rightly are going, yeah, we may take a hit a little bit in our rush defense, but the bump we're going to get in our pass defense? Because when we talk about how important pass rushers are, well, I just said it right there, but outside linebackers, defensive ends, it's rushing the passer. That's where the value comes in. That's why they are arguably the second most important position behind quarterback. It's have a guy that can throw the ball and have a guy that can run after the guy that throws the ball. I think the Green Bay Packers are going, man, we'll take a hit in our rush defense to add one of the 3 best pass rushers on planet Earth. I think the Packers worked through it and we're okay with the result they came up with. And I am too. 719-24-7. 13-13. Got this Boise State USF game. No, it's not a conference game, but could the mighty Broncos fall right out of the gate? Update you on that coming up next here on Extra Sports 1300. I thought this game with Boise State and South Florida could be a bit tricky. And it is. Start of the second half in Tampa. And Boise State trailing the Bulls 10-7. South Florida will have the ball to begin the third quarter. And I know what you're thinking. It's not the running game. Sire Gaines has 43 yards on what was I looking at? 8 carries. 41 yards on 8 carries. So it's not that they're missing Genty. This South Florida team, pretty good. And the consequence, I talked about this with Derek Rackley last hour of Westwood One. Like, I don't know that the consequence is quite there for the Texas-Ohio State game. I think both of those teams, win or lose, will have, win, obviously. But if they lose, both teams will have every opportunity to make the college football playoff. For a team like Boise State, losing this game could mean everything. Right? Sure, they're the prohibitive favorite to win the Mountain West. But even if they win the Mountain West, that doesn't mean they're making the college football playoff. Now, Boise State has one game that I think where they can really showcase themselves. They do play Notre Dame. But you almost look at it for a team in Boise State's place in the Mountain West. If they lose this game, it's almost like if they want a shot at the college football playoff, they may have to beat Notre Dame. Because that's the margin for error and how thin it is for the group of 6 for a non-power conference team. Especially one that doesn't, I know Maddox Madsen's a very good player, but without the star power of Genty. It's more difficult. And then who knows what South Florida is able to do in the American. So you looking for consequence in week 1, probably not Texas, Ohio State. That's curiosity. That's a showcase game. That's just fun. But Ohio State or Texas, whoever loses that game, could still very well end up in the college football playoff. For a team like Boise State, not that easy. But let's pause on Armageddon for Boise State in the Mountain West for right now. It is only 10-7. But this is one of the games in week 1 that does have some consequence to it. Even in the expanded, not the ultimately expanded field, what we're going to get to, but the more than 4 teams that we currently have now. So 10-7, South Florida with the ball. They're on their own half of the side of the field, so not threatening to extend their lead quite yet. And then tomorrow, we'll have CU Georgia Tech. Saturday, Falcons in the afternoon, Rams at night, and Texas Ohio State in the morning if you are interested in that. Speaking of, I'll be out at Falcon Alley with our friends at Frank Azar on Saturday if you want to drop by and say hi on your way into Falcon Stadium for the game. Be out there quite a bit this season with goodies to give away. I wouldn't just expect you to come up and say hi because it's me. But if you could win things, I'm not above bribing. I have been very clear on that. This from the 719 vis-a-vis the Micah Parsons deal. Has anyone checked on Cowboy fans? Sure they aren't happy. I've heard from one. He's not doing well. So keep him in your thoughts. I have another one in my immediate family. Have not heard from him yet, but I know how he operates, and I'm not going to reach out. Couldn't give him his space. But yeah, Cowboy fans, not happy. Nor should they be. This is not a good day. There's no way to spin this thing. I mean, how's Jerry Jones? That's what I'm fascinated to see moving forward. How is Jerry Jones going to spin this? Is this his Herschel Walker deal? Is he going to go out there and say that they'll be able to take these 2 first-round picks, which is not as much as they got for Herschel Walker, and say, now I'm going to do this? Man. And there was a clip, and I don't expect, like, Michael Irvin is a former Dallas Cowboy. He's not an NFL insider, so I don't put anything on him. But he was just on NFL Live today saying there's no chance Micah Parsons gets traded. That clip is going viral. And not great. Not great for Cowboys fans. Great day to be a Packer fan. I think you're coming out of the NFC. I do. We'll see when Jerry Jones speaks and what rationalization he puts on this thing. But finally, the way he does business has burned him. And how will he respond? Boise State got the ball back, but nearly got sacked in the end zone. So they're pinned way up against their own goal line. 10-7 USF. Tomorrow, we'll get more into the CU Georgia Tech game. Have some things planned on that front. Air Force Bucknell will preview with the voice of the Falcons, Jim Arthur, and more fallout from the Micah Parsons deal. For now, I bid you adieu. I will be calling Air Force men's soccer alongside Jeff Bennett. If you are a Falcon fan, we'll be on WAC International, I believe. This from the 719. My brother-in-law is a Cowboys fan. I just texted him telling him his team is a joke. That's not nice. Although he is your brother-in-law. So I don't know what the dynamic is. Maybe you're not a huge fan of your brother-in-law, but that's kind of mean. I mean, he knows that, I'm sure. You don't have to tell him. Enjoy your evening. Unless you're a Cowboys fan, and I don't know how you can. We'll talk tomorrow at 3 here on Extra Sports 1300.